They didn't find any cheese for some time until they finally went into an area of the maze where they had never been before. Cheese Station N. They squealed with delight. They found what they had been looking for, a great supply of new cheese. They could hardly believe their eyes. It was the biggest store of cheese the mice had never seen. In the meantime, Hem and Haw were still back in the Cheese Station C, evaluating their situation. They were now suffering from the effects of having no cheese. They were becoming frustrated and angry and were blaming each other for the situation they were in. Now and then, Ha thought about this mice friend, Sniff and Curry, and wondered if they had found any cheese yet. He believed they might be having a hard time, as running through the maze usually involved some uncertainty. But he also knew that it was likely to only last for a while. Sometimes, Haw would imagine Sniff and Scurry finding new cheese and enjoying it. He thought about how good it would be for him to be out on an adventure in the maze and to find fresh new cheese he could almost taste. The more clearly Haw saw the image of himself finding and enjoying the new cheese, the more he saw himself leaving the cheese station C. "Let's go," he exclaimed, all of a sudden. "No," Hem quickly responded. "I like it here. It's comfortable. It's what I know. Besides, it's dangerous out there." "No, it isn't," Ha argued. "We have run through the many parts of the maze before, and we can do it again." "I thought I'm getting too old for that," Hem said, "and I'm afraid I'm not interested in getting lost and making a fool of myself. Are you?" With that, Haw's fear of falling returned and his hope of finding new cheese faded. So every day the little people continued to do what they had done before. They went to the cheese station C, found no cheese, and returned home, carrying their worries and frustrations with them. They tried to deny what was happening, but found it harder to get to sleep, had less energy the next day, and were becoming irritable. Their homes were not the nurturing place they once were. The little people had difficulty sleeping and were having nightmares about not finding any cheese. But Hem and Haw still returned to Cheese Station C and waited there every day. Hem said, "You know, if we just work harder, we will find that thing has really changed that much. The cheese is probably nearby. Maybe they just hid it behind the wall." The next day, Hem and Haw returned with the tools. Hem held the chisel and Haw banged on the hammer until they made a hole in the wall of Cheese Station C. They peeked inside but found no cheese. They were disappointed but believed they could solve the problem. So they started earlier, stayed longer and worked harder. But after a while, all they had was a large hole in the wall. Haw was beginning to realize the difference between activity and productivity. "Maybe," Hem said, "we should just sit here and see what happens. Sooner or later, they have to put the cheese back." Haw wanted to believe that, so each day he went home to rest and returned reluctantly with Hem to Cheese Station C. But cheese never reappeared. By now the little people were growing weak from hunger and stress. Haw was getting tired of just waiting for their situation to improve. He began to see that the longer they stayed in the cheeseless situation, the worse off they would be. Haw knew they were losing their edge. Finally one day, Haw began laughing at himself. Haw, look at us. We keep doing the same thing over and over again and wonder why things not getting better. If this wasn't so ridiculous, it would be even funnier." Haw did not like the idea of having to run through the maze again because he knew he would get lost and have no idea where he would find any cheese. But he had to laugh at this folly when he saw what his fear was doing to him. He asked them, "Where did you put our running shoes?" It took long time to find them because they had put everything away when they found their cheese at Cheese Station C, thinking they wouldn't need them anymore. As Hem saw his friends getting into running gear, he said, "You're not really going out in the maze again, are you? Why don't you just wait here until they put the cheese back?" "Because you just didn't get it," Ha said. "I didn't want to see it either, but now I realize they are never going to put yesterday's cheese back. It's time to find new cheese," Hem argued. "But what if there is no cheese out there? Or even if there is, what if you don't find it?" "I don't know," Ha said. He had asked himself those same questions too many times and felt fear again that kept him where he was. He asked himself, "Where am I more likely to find cheese? Here or in the maze?" He painted a picture in his mind. He saw himself venturing out in the maze with a smile on his face. While this picture surprised him, it made him feel good. He saw himself getting lost now and then in the maze, but felt confident he would eventually find new cheese out there and all the things that came with it. He gathered his courage. Then he used his imagination to paint the most believable picture he could, with the most realistic details of him finding and enjoying the taste of new cheese. He saw himself eating Swiss cheese with holes in it, bright orange cheddar and American cheeses, Italian mozzarella and wonderfully soft French camembert cheese. And then he heard him say something and realized they were still sitting at the cheese station C. Ha said, "Sometimes things change and they are never the same again. This looks one of those times that life moves on, and so should we." Ha looked at his emaciated companion and tried to talk sense to him, but Hem's fear had turned into anger and he wouldn't listen. Ha didn't mean to be rude to his friend, but he had to laugh at how silly they both looked. As Ha prepared to leave, he started to feel more alive, knowing that he was finally able to laugh at himself, let go and move on. Ha laughed and announced, "It's maze time." Hem didn't laugh and he didn't respond. Ha picked up a small sharp rock and wrote a serious thought on the wall of Hem to think about. As was his custom, Ha even drew a picture of cheese around it, hoping it would help Hem to smile, lighten up and go after the new cheese. But Hem didn't want to see it. It read, "If you don't change, you become extinct. What would you do if you weren't afraid?" Then Ha stuck his head out and peered anxiously into the maze. He thought about how he had gotten himself into this cheeseless situation. He had believed that there may not be any cheese in the maze or he may not find it. Such fearful beliefs were immobilizing and killing him. Ha smiled. He knew Hem was wondering, "Who moved my cheese?" But Ha was wondering, why didn't I get up and move with the cheese sooner? As he started out into the maze, Ha looked back to where he had come from and felt its comfort. He could feel himself being drawn back into the familiar territory, even though he hadn't found cheese here for some time. Ha became more anxious and wondered if he really wanted to go out into the maze. He wrote a saying on the wall ahead of him and stared at it for some time. He thought about it. He knows sometimes some fear can be good. When you are afraid things are going to get worse, if you don't do something, it can promote you into action. But it is not good when you are so afraid it keeps you from doing anything. He looked at his right, to the part of maze where he had never been, and felt the fear. Then he took a deep breath, turned right into the maze and jogged slowly into the unknown. As he tried to find his way, Ha worried at first that he might have waited too long in the cheese station C. He hadn't had any cheese for so long that he was now weak. It took him longer and it was more painful than usual to get through the maze. He decided that if he ever got the chance again, he would get out of his comfort zone and adapt to change sooner. It would make things easier. Then Ha smiled a weak smile as he thought, better late than never. During the next several days, Ha found a little cheese here and there, but nothing that lasted very long. He had hoped to find enough cheese to take some back to him and encourage him to come into the maze. But Ha didn't feel confident enough yet. He had to admit he found it confusing in the maze. Things Things seemed to have changed since the last time he was out here. Just when he thought he was getting ahead, he would get lost in the corridor. It seemed his progress was 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. It was a challenge, but he had to admit that back in the maze, hunting for cheese wasn't really as bad as he feared it might be. As time went on, he began to wonder if it was realistic for him to expect to find new cheese. He wondered if he had bitten off more than he could chew. Then he laughed, realizing that he had nothing to chew on that moment. Whenever he started to get discouraged, he reminded himself that what he was doing, as comfortable as it was at that moment, was in reality much better than staying in cheeseless situation. He was taking control rather than simply letting things happen to him. Then he reminded himself if Sniff and Scurry could move on, so could he. Later, as Haw looked back on things, he realized that cheese at Cheese Station C had not just disappeared overnight, as he had once believed. The amount of cheese that had been there toward the end had been getting smaller, and what was left had grown old. It didn't taste as good. Mold may even have begun to grow on the old cheese. Although he hadn't noticed it, he had to admit, however, that if he had wanted to, he probably could have seen what was coming, but he didn't. Have now realized that the change probably would have taken him by surprise if he had been watching what was happening all along. And if he had anticipated change, maybe that's what Sniff and Scurry had been doing. He decided he would stay more alert from now on. He would expect change to happen and look for it. He would trust his basic instincts to sense when change was going to occur and be ready to adapt it. He stopped for a rest and wrote on the wall of the maze. Sometimes later, after not finding cheese for what seemed like a long time, Have finally came across a huge cheese station which looked promising. He wrote on the wall before, "Smell the cheese often, so you know when it is getting old." When he went inside, however, he was most disappointed to discover that the cheese station was empty. This empty feeling has happened to me too often, he thought. He felt like giving up. Haw was losing his physical strength. He knew he was lost and was afraid he would not survive. He thought about turning around and heading back to Cheese Station C. At last, if he made it back and him was still there, Haw wouldn't be alone. Then he asked himself the same question again. What would I do if I weren't afraid? Haw thought he was past his fear, but he was afraid more often than he liked to admit. Even to himself. He hasn't always sure that he was afraid of, but in his weakened condition, he knows now he is simply fearful of going on alone. Him didn't know it, but he was running behind because he was still weighed down by fearful blips. Haw wondered if Hem had moved on or if he is still paralyzed by his own fears. Then Haw remembered the times when he had felt his best in the maze. It was when he was moving along. He wrote on the wall, knowing it was as much a reminder to himself as it was a marking for his friend Hem, hopefully to follow. He wrote on the wall, "Movement in a new direction helps you find new cheese." Haw looked down the dark passageway and was aware of his fear. What lay ahead? Was it empty? Or worse, were the dangers lurking? He began to imagine all kinds of frightening things that could happen to him. He was carrying himself to death. Then he laughed at himself. He realized his fears were making things worse. So he did what he would do if he weren't afraid. He moved in a new direction. As he started running down the dark corridor, he began to smile. Haw didn't realize it yet, but He was discovering what nourished his soul. He was letting go and trusting what lays ahead for him, even though he did not know exactly what it was. To his surprise, Hoss started to enjoy himself more and more. Why do I feel so good? He wondered. I don't have any cheese and I don't know where I'm going. Before long, he knew why he felt good. He stopped to write again on the wall. He wrote on the wall, when you stop being afraid, you feel good. Imagine yourself enjoying your new cheese leads you to it. How realized he had been held captive by his own fear. Moving in a new direction had freed him. Now he felt the cool breeze that was blowing in his part of the maze, and it was refreshing. He took in some deep breaths and felt invigorated by the moment. Once he had gotten past his fear, it turned out to be more enjoyable than he once believed it would be. Ha hadn't felt this way for a long time. He had almost forgotten how much fun it was to go for it, to make things even better. Ha started to paint a picture in his mind again. He saw himself in a great realistic detail, sitting in the middle of a pile of all his favorite cheese from cheddar to Beyer. He saw himself eating the many cheese he liked, and he enjoyed what he saw. Then he imagined how much he would enjoy all their great taste. The more clearly he saw the image of himself enjoying new cheese, the more real and believable it became. He could sense that he was going to find it. He wrote, the quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you find new cheese. Haw kept things about what he could gain instead of what he was losing. He wondered why he had always thought that a change would lead to something worse. Now he realized that change would lead to something better. Why didn't I see this before? He asked himself. Then he raced through the maze with greater strength and agility. Before long, he spotted a cheese station and became excited as he noticed little pieces of new cheese near the entrance. There were types of cheese he had never seen before, but they looked great. He tried them and found that they were delicious. He ate most of the new cheese bits that were available and put a few in his pockets to have later, and perhaps share with him. He began to regain his strength. He entered cheese station with great excitement, but to his dismay, he found it was empty. Someone had already been there and left only the few bites of new cheese. He realized that if he had moved sooner, he would very likely have found a good deal of new cheese here. Haw decided to go back and see if Hem was ready to join him. As he retraced his steps, he stopped and wrote on the wall. It is safer to search in the maze than remain in a cheeseless situation. After a while, Haw made his way back to cheese station C and found Hem. He offered him bites of new cheese, but was turned up. Hem appreciated his friend's gesture, but said, I don't think I would like new cheese. It's not what I'm used to. I want my own cheese back, and I'm not going to change until I get what I want. Haw just shook his head in disappointment and reluctantly went back out on his own. As he returned to the maze farthest point he had reached in the maze, he missed his friend, but realized he liked what he was discovering, even before he found what he hoped would be great supply of new cheese. If ever, he knew that what made him happy wasn't just having cheese. He was happy when he wasn't being run by his fear. He liked what he was doing now. Knowing this, Haw didn't feel as weak as he had when he stayed in the cheese station C with no cheese. Just realizing he was not letting his fear stop him, and know that he had taken a new direction, nourished him and gave him strength. Now he felt that it was just a question of time before he found what he needed. In fact, he sensed he had already found what he was looking for. He smiled as he realized. Haw realized again, as he had once before, that what you are afraid of is never as bad as what you imagine. The fear you let build up in your mind is worse than the situation that actually exists. He had been so afraid of never finding new cheese that he didn't even want to start looking. But since starting his journey, he had found enough cheese in the corridors to keep him going. Now he looked forward to find more. Just looking ahead was becoming exciting. His whole thinking had been clouded by his worries and fears. He used to think about not having enough cheese or not having it last as long as he wanted. He used to think more about what could go wrong than what could go right. But that changed in the days since he had left cheese station C. He used to believe that cheese should never be moved and that change wasn't right. Now he realized it was natural for change to continuously occur whether you expect it or not. Change would surprise you only if you didn't expect it, weren't looking for it. When he realized he had changed his beliefs, he paused to write on the wall. Old beliefs do not lead you to new cheese. When you see that you can find and enjoy new cheese, you change course. Haw hadn't found any cheese yet, but as he ran through the maze, he thought about what he had already learned. Haw now realized that his new beliefs were encouraging new behaviors. He was behaving differently than when he kept returning to the same cheeseless station. He knew that when you change what you believe, you change what you do. You can believe that a change will harm you and resist it. Or you can believe that finding new cheese will help you and embrace the change. It all happened on what you choose to believe. He wrote on the wall, nothing small changes yearly helps you adapt to the big changes that are to coming. Haw knew he would be in better shape now if he had dealt with the change much sooner and left cheese station C earlier. He would feel stronger in body and spirit, and he could have coped better with the challenge to find new cheese. In fact, he probably would have found it by now if he had expected change rather than wasting time denying that the change had already taken place. Okay guys, let's see in the next part. If you like this video, like, share, comment and subscribe to Modern Tamilan. They didn't find any cheese for some time until they finally